Hello and welcome to the Simon and Friends podcast. I am Simon Short. Joining me this week on Draft Week, it has been Parker. Ben, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. We are loaded. We are so loaded for this draft stuff, man.
Yeah, it is officially time. Ben and I are now doing our fourth annual NFL Draft over under preview. Ben, this is the fourth time we're doing the show, man. How does that feel?
Old, but vintage. Vintage is the word, right?
It's perfect because I now have to stand up for this podcast because my back was hurting too much sitting in a chair for the last couple months. So yeah, that's how we're feeling. That's how we're feeling. We're gonna try to keep this thing tight today, guys. We're gonna keep this to an hour because not only are we loaded on this show, but everywhere on Box Score Network. You can get all of the everything you could want
Yeah.
on the NFL Draft Buzz. So make sure you are going to the YouTube channel. Make sure you stay here on the YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube. Thanks for being here. Because we've had stuff every single day this week. We'll have reaction pods, reaction episodes. I'll have draft grades up over the weekend via YouTube as well. So make sure you are here every single day. Don't stop now because we are not done. This episode, Ben, this episode, viewers and listeners, is going to be completely predictive. All right, so I'm going to issue one big caveat here at the top. For months, almost a year at this point, Ben and I have given you guys our own personal opinions, what we would do, how we rank guys, our opinions on things. Even our latest mock draft on YouTube has, I don't know, I'd say it's still like 60 to 70% what we would actually do on those mocks, with some realism baked in. So really up until today, you can know what Simon thinks of the draft, what Ben thinks of the draft. Today's episode is purely what is going to happen in the first round of the draft. So that's our own analysis. That's just what we're hearing. That's what the tea leaves are saying with a little bit of fun baked in. So this is the annual over under first round NFL draft preview. Ben and I are going to go position by position. We have a couple conversations we want to have, but we're really just trying to identify how many guys and which guys are going in the first round of the draft. Ben, are you ready?
I'm ready, man. More than ready. Been waiting a year for this, man.
That's all we do for the whole year after the show ends. We're ready for the next one. So
Yeah,
let's
we just
start at
put.
quarterback, Ben. Let's start at quarterback. I don't use the odds because when we did this show for the first time 4 years ago, I wasn't paying attention to odds. So I'm not going to change it now. I don't know what they're saying at this point. Well, I do know what they're saying, but I don't care. I'm setting it at 2.5. Ben, I tell you, over or under 2.5 quarterbacks go in the first round of this draft tomorrow night, tonight, as people are listening and watching this on Thursday. What do you say?
I'll take two. In fact, I would tend toward one more than three. So that's where I'm at the moment. But I'll settle in at two.
I am also going to take the under. It is trending very heavily towards one quarterback being taken. Kind of a this game of chicken on, because at first it was, oh, all like we only have two good ones, and then Shuck and Dart are going to sneak in, and oh, then these guys are going to trade back in. I want to have a conversation about trading back in for quarterbacks, and now it's starting to settle back to all these teams kind of know, yeah, we don't really want to trade back in for one of these guys. And oh, I'm a Dart team. Oh, I'm a Sanders team. So maybe I don't have to compete with as many teams as I thought, but I'm going to go under pretty easily too. I think Ward is obviously going to be at the top. I think it's very unlikely we see more than one quarterback go with the other 31 picks in the first round. But here's the conversation I wanted to have with you, Ben. Um, there's been a lot of consternation the last 2 weeks on quarterbacks and being invited to the draft and who is moving up, as I mentioned. Someone moving up for Dart or Shuck or Sanders. One of these teams in the top three, especially, right? Giants or Browns. Could they move back in, take that blue chip guy in the top three, move back in for the quarterback? And then Jalen Milroe gets invited to the draft and accepts the invitation. And we're like, well, that's not going to happen unless he's going to be a top 40 pick, unless there's a real chance he's a first round pick. So I was thinking, what's this process, right? So the league and the TV crews and the teams have like a generally good understanding of who has first round grades. Who could we actually take in the first round? So here's my theory that I want to give you. We know these NFL teams do exactly what you and I have been doing for months. Run through mocks, run through stack scenarios, run through different options for weeks and weeks and weeks. That's all these guys are doing once they finish up their actual evaluations. They try to map out the entire thing so they know where they need to trade up for certain guys, where they could trade back for certain guys. They want to know all the scenarios. So when they look at their quarterbacks, especially, and they're like, okay, we have this grade on this guy. Okay, we have this grade on this guy. Here's who we would take with our pick. Here's who we would trade back up for. Here's as much as we would give up. Okay, now let's run through every scenario that I would take. It's Doctor Strange in Endgame, right? Or is that one Endgame? Yeah, in Endgame. Um, okay, there's all these scenarios that can play out. Here's the one scenario that we could get Jalen Milroe at 25 or Jackson Dart at 18, whatever it is. So based on that and based on how likely they think it is, they then tell the league, yeah, we could end up taking this person at 21, right? We could, let's say it's the Steelers. Hey, if these six guys get drafted ahead of us, yeah, we'll just take Milroe at 21, or we'll trade back to 28 and we'll take him. Or the Giants. And oh, if Sanders doesn't get picked, or if Sanders does get picked in the top 20, we'll trade back up to get Dart, something like that. And they tell the league that, so then the league then sends the invitation. And maybe they give the caveat to the player of, hey, you're a round one graded guy, you're gonna be, maybe they don't actually tell them this, but maybe they're just the caveat of, hey, there's no guarantee, but there's a chance. We've talked to a couple teams. You probably know as the player that there's a couple teams looking at you. You could choose to decline and stay home so you don't get shown on TV for the whole Thursday night and into Friday, but you do have an invitation because some team could jump back in to trade you. What do you think about that theory when we add in the like business side and the TV element of this whole debacle of trying to get a quarterback in the draft?
I think you're dead on track with it about what actually happens, how that I don't know if you can imagine a little golden ticket flowing from hand to hand until it actually
Yes.
hits, the quarterback himself or whoever's getting
Hmm.
the invite. I think you're dead on with the process there. I'll even kind of add to it with more and more guys declining to show up for the draft and just stay home, even guys who know they're going top 10.
Hmm.
The NFL needs somebody. So, of course, they're going to trend toward the quarterbacks or a player that has some kind of big personality level. So that also would influence who gets the invite. But yeah, I think you're dead on with process there.
All right, so Ben and I are both under 2.5. Ben, if you think a second quarterback does go, who do you think it is?
I'm still on Shador. I realize that most people aren't. There's very little chance of him going high, but I still figure there's a chance he gets in somewhere, whether it's a mid round pick or somebody trades back in at 25, 26, whatever. That would be the second guy for me.
I'm going to lean Dart. Now, I think the Steelers are the team. I think between those two guys, if both were available, I think they would take Sanders. But I think Dart is the guy that, if we're talking about those teams trading back up for, I think he has the better shot. I think it sounds very much like he is like Dayball is a Dart guy. Like Dayball's like, if we're taking a quarterback, it's Dart. I heard today on the Tom McShay show that Dayball just wants to take Dart at 3 and just like call it a day and just be like, just give me my quarterback. We'll deal with the rest later, which is wild stuff. But I think he's a Dart guy. It sounds like the Saints might prefer to be a Dart guy as opposed to a Sanders guy. So then you're kind of looking at if the Browns trade back in, maybe they're a Sanders guy. So if two teams trading back in would be Dart, one team already in, one team maybe trading in would be Sanders. I would lean Dart just because I think the Giants out of those four teams is most likely to make something happen for a quarterback. So I've got Dart, you've got Sanders, but we both rather just kind of lean down all the way down to one. But we'll take the under at the 2.5 pretty easily. All right, running back. I'm realizing this 2.5 is a little high. This should probably be 1.5, but I'll make it easy to start. I set it at 2.5 to start because early in the week, Travion Henderson was starting to get some buzz again about being a first round pick, and maybe more in line of certain teams might have him over Omari and Hampton. But before we dig further into that, running back over under 2.5 in the first round. What do you got?
I took the under again at two. And again, just like the quarterback, I would be more inclined toward one than I would three, but I'm at two.
Yeah, I am at under as well. Um, I'm at two. I think if somebody else, because let's get into this. Here's the second conversation I want to have around running back before we talk heavy on Genty. We're no longer a league where if you take a running back in the first round, it has to be a bell cow, right? It has to be like from the last few years, not like Najee Harris going right to the Steelers or even, Bijan Robinson, because we thought he was going to be a bell cow, but then he ended up being a backfield mate with Tyler Algier. But we saw Jahmyr Gibbs go at 12, and he's a part-time player essentially. So Travion Henderson could be that, and maybe so some teams would have him over an Amari and Hampton because they really like what Henderson does as a blocker, as a pass catcher, as a true speed guy. but it doesn't feel like we'd have to make it Omari and Hampton necessarily. Any thoughts on that in terms of if you're taking a running back in the first round, does it need to be a certain style or does it just need to be a team fit and team grade situation?
For me, it would be team fit, team grade. At the moment, I favor Hampton. That's only because there's such a heavy volume
Hmm.
of production for 3 years.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious! But I will say, if you're a team that's looking for the home run threat, and along with you mentioned the blocking, that would be more Henderson than Hampton, in my opinion.
I think if depending on the scenarios of what team I'm the GM for, if I'm taking a running back late in the first round, you're probably looking for a finishing piece, right? So I'm probably looking at I would prefer Henderson, like my own personal like I love the blocking, I love the explosion.
Right.
But if I'm a team that maybe wanted Genty in the first round because I want a bell cow, like explosive, get the spot guy the ball, get it 1,700 total yards a season, I want Hampton and I want him early in the second, right? If I'm the Raiders and I was thinking about Genty at one point, yeah, I'll take Amari and Hampton in the second. But if I'm the Bills, and James Cook, that whole thing, he's a very similar player actually. But I would look at Henderson in the first round as a complementary piece kind of thing, or the Chiefs, that kind of idea. Here's the big thing on running backs. Here's the latest news. This is the big buzz going on in the last 24 hours, 48 hours before the draft. Ashton Jeanty is the guy that, as the trade buzz is increasing as we get closer to the draft, it's Jeanty that teams are looking to trade up for. That coincides with the report that the Jaguars want to make a splashy pick on offense at 5, as opposed to going with someone like Mason Graham, who everybody has been mocking there, I don't know, since January, pretty much, since February. Um, so Genty seems right now, the buzz is he's the guy, right? And it's you want to get up to him ahead of Chicago at 10 is the first thing. And then if you want to, if you don't want Jacksonville to take him now, Jacksonville, the buzz is also they either want to take Genty at 5 or they would be willing to trade back and take Ted McMillan. They want offensive firepower. And by the way, Ted McMillan seems like his range is 5 to 12. So boom, score box score right there, baby. Um, Ashton Jeanty. Let's run through this. So if there's a move back by Denver and Dallas are sounding like the two teams that might want to trade ahead. So Jacksonville could either take Jeanty at 5, um, so they would have to go to 4 potentially, go all the way up to New England, which for New England, everyone's been saying like they don't really want to take Will Campbell at 4. Like, could they trade back and if they don't get to keep Campbell, do they just take Banks? Do they take Connerly, some left tackle? Um, or if the Jags do want to trade back and you get to 5, um, could those two teams still do that? Um, what else did I have here on them? Denver and Dallas would have to give up a lot. Now, Chicago, this was the other thing. Chicago, knowing Denver and Dallas are nipping at the heels to get up ahead of them, they have more assets. They have an extra second round pick, so could they just move up a couple spots to get one of those guys? And then if there's a move back by Jacksonville and Genty goes 5 to somebody, and then Tet goes, let's just say to 8 to Carolina, then Dallas, man. What happens to Dallas at that point? Like, those are Genty and Tet, those are the two guys we see for them. Do they try to move back and take Golden? Do they try to move back and take Hampton? Who's moving up in that case? Does someone like a certain edge that's left? Or is it at one of those tight ends? Because we'll talk about tight end, but by the way, they're simultaneously rising on big boards even more, but falling on mocks. So could Denver jump the Colts to take Warren, and then Dallas moves back to take Hampton or Marcus Golden? Man, Jacksonville. We've shaken our heads at Jacksonville for so long, and they're the ones that are like throwing a wrench in this thing right before the draft, and I love it. Um, so here's my question, because I just said a lot of words to you. What do you think is like the likelihood, validity, value, rumors of Genty being traded up for, and then that whole trickle down scenario of what could kind of happen there? Who do you like this trade up for? Who do you like the Genty going to overall?
Isn't it a great time of year, man? There's more rumors than high school at prom week, right? I mean, it's flying everywhere. Goodness gracious! I very well believe that enough teams would be interested in trading up for Ashton Jeanty. I do believe that. I'm a little skeptical on teams wanting to pay the price to move from, say, 12, 15, 20, all the way up to, say, 4 or 5 to get him. I'm a little skeptical on that. But I could see somebody at 10, Chicago, trading up to pick him up if they think he's just not going to be there, because you do have teams like the Raiders and the Jets who, man, they can kind of pick anybody. I mean, honestly. So I could well see Chicago doing that. I would also be a little on the low percentage side of Jacksonville taking him, only because I'm going to be a little upset with them if they do. I mean, you've got the defensive tackle sitting there, but if you don't like him, you've got offensive linemen sitting there, and I know you're kind of sort of covered on O line, but boy, Mimbu or Campbell, either one would upgrade you over the next couple of seasons. So I hope Jacksonville doesn't do that. Jonty's the real deal. You talk about a guy you're going to hand the football to a lot, and maybe he doesn't make a second contract because he's worn out, but for his first 2, 3, 4 seasons, he will be handed the ball to a lot. That's the idea here. He's the real deal. He's got the home run threat, breaks tackles, everything.
So I just kind of ran the numbers on the Hill trade chart, and we said in a recent show you probably only have to pay 70 cents on the dollar to trade up in this draft because it's not considered super high value. But right now, if the buzz is everyone wants Jonty, who we're saying is a blue chip true prospect, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think you're going to have to pay.
Right.
I don't think it's possible for Denver to get to 4 or 5. I just don't. You're talking about their second round pick and like a first or second round pick next year too. That seems crazy.
Yeah.
So what I think the scenario is let's just say New England sticks and takes Campbell. And then Jacksonville's like, we're going to take Jonty. Let's call Dallas and let's call Denver. Hey, or not even Denver. Let's call Dallas. Hey, Dallas, we'll go to 12 because we think we can get Tet there. 347 to 468. You're talking 120 points. Your second round pick.
Okay.
All right, and we'll send you back a fourth. And if you don't do that, we'll just take Jonty. Or by the way, Chicago's also calling, and they're offering one
Right.
of their second round picks. You
Right.
know, um, and then so let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say Jacksonville just does what we thought they were going to do: take Mason Graham, take a lineman, whatever. Then it's Chicago, and they're like, we could take Jonty. That would be kind of fun. Hey, Denver, we are 100 points away. Give us your second round pick, and that way we don't take them, but also Dallas doesn't take them at 12. Give us your second round. So I think Denver could get to 10 to Chicago. I think if Dallas is all smokescreen in this and they even say, hey, Denver, we'll take Jonty. You come up and get him. Give us your second round pick. So it's going to be about Sean Payton, right? What is Sean Payton willing to do? And then yeah, that would be the trickle up effect. Does Jacksonville actually do it? So a lot going on there. I do think somebody, based on all this buzz, to answer the question of the over under and how many are going, someone's going to miss out on Jonty in this first round, and then someone's going to take Omari and Hampton in this round. They might have to move around. I don't like Dallas taking him at 12, but in my scenario, if they traded back to 20, so Denver could take one of those tight ends, get up ahead of the Colts. I like that scenario, and then they take Omari and Hampton down at 20. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't see a team taking Travion Henderson. When I look at these teams that have running backs that are at the end of the first round, it's not impossible, but I think it's more of an outside shot. So I'm going under the 2.5 with 2, and I think it's Jonty and Hampton. Anything else for you on running backs?
No, I do like what you said about the teams that would be interested in Jonty. So it could be Chicago or Dallas, maybe moving up to 5 if they really love him. And then if that doesn't happen and he's still sitting there at 10, then maybe Denver is looking at spots 10 or 12 to trade up to. I think all of that is well within reason if they love him enough. Yeah.
Exactly, 100%. Thanks for summarizing that for everybody with my craziness. Um, wide receiver. Wide receiver. Now, for the purposes of this, we're calling Travis Hunter a wide receiver in this exercise. Okay, so we're not going to include him in the cornerback because for some reason, all college football season, he was a cornerback, major, and minor at wide receiver, and now it's being flipped. I set this over under at 2.5 once again. So that's Travis Hunter, that's Ted McMillan, And then you're choosing between your Matthew Goldens, Luther Burdens, Emeka Bukas. What are you doing here with wide receiver?
I'm going to take the over very, very clearly here, especially when you added in Travis Hunter on the wide receiver
Yep.
board. So I will say it was pretty easy for me to go over 2.5 at wide receiver. It was a lot harder for me to figure out which three
Right.
receivers that might be because in some cases you're dealing with some very fast guys who are Smurf level. I mean, they don't have the height, they just don't. And then you've got some big men back there who might slip into that late first round. So anyway, I've got a list of about I don't know 6 wide receivers who might could slip in all told. But I do figure at the end of the first round, we're probably looking at least 3. So I'm over that 2.5.
I'm over the 2.5 as well. It feels like now that we've also solidified that Ted's not falling past 12, 13 to 32 is a long time to go without a wide receiver, especially because along with Ted moving up, it feels like the trench guys are moving up even more, right? Not that they weren't already pretty high, but we did a lot of mocks over the last couple months, and like Michael Williams would kept falling randomly. Connerly or Simmons, one of those two would end up not being in the first round. And just doesn't feel like that's going to happen. It feels like all these edge rushers and all these offensive linemen are going to go in the top 20 picks. So then you get to those last 12 picks and you're a team and you're like, okay, well, the best pass rushers are gone. I'm in the playoffs. What else do I need? Okay, well, corners and receivers. So we'll get to corner in a little bit, but you need receivers. So you're going to take some receivers. I think between, Houston at 25, and by the way, Houston apparently is trying to move up for a tackle. So whether they're trying to, I don't know if they're worried that all 5 guys are going to be gone or they just want to get into that tier of like Banks, Membu, Campbell kind of deal. Um, whether it, so Houston I think could go receiver. Ravens at 27, Washington 29, absolutely. Kansas City 31, sure. Philly 32, sneaky. Like they could look up and the trenches have all been kind of, thinned out and they just say, we'll just take a third receiver here. Um, the Chargers at 22. So there's a lot of teams that once you get past that run where a lot of the trench guys are going to go, and we'll talk about them. Um, I you know, maybe 2.5 was too easy, but I think a Golden or an Ibuka get in. If not, maybe both.
Agreed. And again, I don't have a particular team in mind for that, but Tedero McMillan, I think, is he's way up there. But boy, on the
Yep.
back end, anybody from Matthew Golden to Ibuka, Burden, and I even have Jaden Higgins as a possibility
Our
to
guy.
slide in late. I am convinced, whether it's wide receiver or not, somebody's going to catch the tail end of this first round that really most of us mock drafters just do not really consistently have in the first round because some NFL team is just going to have a good grade on him. And I
Yep.
got no problem with that.
All right. That one was pretty easy. I feel like I'm making it easier on us with these over unders this year. Maybe the
Maybe we're
defense
getting
will.
better. How about that?
Ooh, I like that idea. I like that idea. So real joy for everybody that's here. Let's
Yes.
hit tight ends. Let's hit tight ends real quick. I said it at this. I mean, this one's kind of a gimme. I get 2.5 was the only thing I could go with. We know Tyler Warren and we know Colson Loveland are going in the first round. No, doesn't matter where we have them on our boards. It's happening. They're going in the first round. The question is, does a third get in? And I think there's a really low chance of that. But there's been sneaky buzz on Mason Taylor of LSU going at 32 to the Eagles. So literally, you're banking on the very last pick of the first round to try to make this happen. Um, because there's a chance that Goddard gets traded on draft weekend, and that the Eagles could just swoop up his heir apparent right away. Don't know if that's an heir apparent. I guess that's just an heir at that point. So Warren and Loveland, anywhere from like 7 to 22, it feels like. Because again, as we hear about big boards, it's more like, oh yeah, both guys are in everyone's top 7. But then we do mock drafts, or we look at mock drafts, and it's like, wow, they could kind of fall a little bit. Do we get a third tight end, Ben? Do we get a third tight end in the first round?
I'm going to say no. This is another spot. I've got 2 guys. I could see a third. The idea there of Taylor to the Eagles, that specific team player match, is a good one. Taylor isn't even my tight end 3, but again, that specific match right there, and that's what I mentioned, a few seconds ago. There will be teams who have a need, and this guy fits that need and is high enough on their board where they have no problem taking him late first round. Um, totally see that happening. Whether it's tight end or not, I'm going to vote no. But I've got two tight ends going in the first round.
Yeah, I agree with it. I think it's the under. I think it's more likely the Eagles get there at 32, and if they want to take Taylor, they're trading back. I think they'll call somebody early on day two and say, "Hey, come get this tackle." You know, if Connerly was still there for some reason, or even if someone is banking to get Ursery early on, or there's an edge rusher that they just know somebody really wants, can they'll move back 6 spots and they'll take Taylor or they'll take Arroyo or whoever. So I'm with you on two there. All right, offensive tackle. History leans towards five. You look at the history and it's five. It's anywhere from like 4 to 6, 4 to 7. There's always one leftover guy that's like a true second rounder, and I think there's a clear divide here. But I set it at 4.5 because we do have those questions. You know, it's Campbell, it's Membu, it's Banks. We're counting all those guys as tackles, and then Connerly, Simmons. It feels like one always gets left off of mocks. Connerly because of what people maybe think about him, his overall strength, his overall ability. Simmons, injury, maturity stuff. I set it at 4.5. Ben, where are you going?
I'm going to take the over here. I'm at 5, and I'm not convinced of it, but this is where I really did have to start comparing different position groups because you're looking at, say, the last 4 or 5 picks of the first round.
Hmm.
So this is where I had to start looking at the strength of cornerbacks, the strength of the interior offensive linemen, the strength of the edgers. And when you start kind of doing the math and counting the numbers, and of course you and I have done a million mocks at this point, I'm trending toward 5 offensive tackles is where I'm at.
Yeah, there's just such a low hit rate on finding a tackle later in the draft. And even some of the guys that like we have rated highly overall that are tackles that look like day two guys probably would be better guards than their tackles. So if you're looking to get a starting tackle, you better do it in the first round. So you better come up and get that extra pick or move up if there's a guy you really like. But Campbell, Membu, and Banks could all go top 10. And then after that Super Bowl, you think we're going 22 picks in the first round without another tackle happening? Like, not a chance. You think we're
I
going
don't
that
think
many
so.
without two? Not a chance. Feels like Josh Simmons with the knee stuff. Like everyone's feeling okay about how it's trending. And again, I just think Connerly's too talented. Even if there's a wide range of it, right? Like what people think. I think there's gonna be enough teams that are like, what are we talking about? Josh Connerly's a top three tackle in this class. We're gonna take him
Right.
in the first round. So I also have that. We could go all day on offensive linemen, but I'm gonna stop us there. Otherwise we will. Let's move to the interior of the offensive line. I set this at 1.5. Gray Zabel, Tyler Booker, Donovan Jackson are the guys that we're kind of looking at here. Zabel's range seems crazy. Uh, I'm hearing as like high as 11 to San Francisco. There's Miami at 13. But I gotta say, I'm not buying the Seattle buzz. Everyone's like, his floor is 18. Seattle will take it. They're not gonna take them. They're just not gonna do it. Um, don't get me excited about it. Um, Tyler Booker seems to be falling off boards, or at least off mocks, while Donovan Jackson is sneaking into some. So I thought 1.5 still seemed pretty good. Where are you on this? 1.5 interior guys go in the first round.
I'm gonna take the over. I came in at 2. But this was one where I could see the wide swing. I could see one of
Hmm.
these guys getting in, and I could see 3 of them getting in. I would stand. Listen, I'm gonna. Good Lord willing, I'm gonna be watching that whole first round in my living room tomorrow night. And if Seattle picks Gray Zabel at 18, I'm gonna stand up and applaud. Literally, I will be so thrilled. But it is not going to happen. You have said it 100% right. We do it because we care, but it's just not going to happen. They're not going to do it. But still, these 3 players that you mentioned, whether it's Booker or Zabel or Jackson, they're all 3 good enough to be considered. And there are always teams, I don't care how good you are, that are looking to keep stockpiling the offensive line. So there's a very good chance, but I came in at 2 ultimately.
Yeah, you look at the draft order. 27 Baltimore, 28 Detroit, 29 Washington. Skip Buffalo at 30. But then you go Kansas City at 31, Philadelphia obviously at 32. That's 5 teams that could take a guard. And if you're sitting
Right.
there with picks 28 through 30, those teams I mentioned, and then the Ravens take Tyler Booker at 27. Like, oh my gosh, like, do I need to get Donovan Jackson out? Now, I like more of the day two guards more than I like the day two tackles. So if you're like, we'll take Tate Ratledge at 59, take Marcus Mbao at 59. We'll take Wyatt Milam at 62. You could probably live with that a little bit more. But man, if you wanted a dude like you're gonna have to take him because Donovan Jackson, he's not lasting past 40. He's going top 40. Um, so I'm going over as well. Uh, I don't care about the Booker fall late. Someone's just gonna fall in love with the character even more than anything, and then on top of that, his tape is fantastic. Um, One question I had for you to kind of wrap this whole offensive line thing. If you're an offensive line needy team, just in general, like don't think about like depth chart and like where your specific positions are. Where do you kind of value these guards this year compared to not just these specific tackles, but just you're looking at these guards and you're like, man, I just need to work on my offensive line. Can these guards really help you this year if you're an O-line needy team?
In my opinion, yes, man. I've watched a good bit of it. I think a lot. I think most of these guys. There's a couple that are more traits than they are production, but most of these guys, to me, can step in right away and help. Especially, boy, you look at Patriots' offensive line, for instance. Good
Mm,
gosh, Uh, but even the Giants, man, there's several teams. So no, I do think, and listen, even a Charles Grant, in third round maybe, or even an Emory Jones who played tackle, but I think he's a guard in the NFL. In the top 100, 120 picks, there's guys to get. I think they can contribute right away if you got a bad O line, not a great one, but if you got a bad one, yeah,
yeah, and especially these three at the top feel like whether it's you've got three guys and then you've got a iffy tackle on one side, you could put these guys next to him and be like, well, there's a little help there on the guard. Or if it's just a bad line overall, you plug this guy in and you say, okay, we don't have to worry about this guy. If you put Gray Zabel as your left guard and your left tackle and your center aren't very good, you're like,
yeah,
oh, well, he's going to be all right. So we'll put a tight end next to the tackle. Our right guard will help our center. And then, the Zabel's going to be fine, that kind of thing. Um, I think there's especially these three. There's day one starters at guard that you'll feel pretty good about on the offensive line. That's it for the offense, Ben. So it's a good time to tell everybody that you can also go over to stay on YouTube, go over to Two Peas on a Pod because they also had draft coverage this week. Payne and Parker talk about the best team fits for each of the top prospects in this year's draft. So make sure you check that out. That's Two Peas on a Pod, and that is also up on YouTube right now. So if you're here on YouTube, stay on the channel. Thank you for being here. Make sure you check that video out. And if you're listening on the audio side, thank you as always. And make sure you head over to their feed next to get that. Ben, you also had a mock draft go up on Odds On Favorite. That's not on YouTube, but check out the Odds On Favorite audio podcast and get another mock draft. If you can't get enough mocks, that's Ben and Robertson. So thank you all so much for your support, for checking all this stuff out. We really appreciate it. We are going to be locked and loaded all draft season, all the way through the weekend for you. So, Ben, let's get over to the defense for the over-unders now. The edge rushers. This one's a mess, man. This one's a mess. I set this at 6.5. History leans toward 5, so this might be way too high. But here are all the names that are getting round one buzz. Abdul Carter, Jalen Walker, Mike Williams, Shamar Stewart, Mike Green, James Pierce Jr., Donovan Ezeraku, JT Tuimalau, our guy, JT Tuimalau out of Ohio State, getting a little bit of buzz right here at the end. Um, 8 names coming off of the Super Bowl where just like pass rush, pass rush, pass rush. Take that, Chris Collinsworth. Oh, see, I mess up saying Chris Collinsworth after all that. That's what I get. That's what I get for trying to showboat. 8 names after that Super Bowl run by the Eagles and what their defensive line was. So I set this at 6.5. Where are you going?
this by far was the hardest for me. I mean, by far, not only to determine which guys, but how many. I came in at the under. I surprised myself. I
Mm,
came in at 6. And I was trying to decide between 6 and 7. So you nailed this one. I was all over 6 and 7, and nothing would surprise me here. It wouldn't surprise me if all 8 names went, But I came in at 6. The biggest problem for me was because Carter first round, Jalen Walker first round, Michael Williams first round. The biggest problem for me was I wasn't sure how teams were going to view the Mike Greens and the James Pierces, who were
mm-hmm,
so fast off the edge.
mm-hmm.
But you have small school problems. You have maybe not a 3 down player problems. You have even off field concerns for both
Mm-hmm.
players. So, boy, those are some yellow flags coming up, right? So I didn't know how NFL teams were going to view that. And then even Shamar Stewart, who I'm fairly convinced is first round, but the production was low in terms of sacks, right? So
Right.
but I still think he goes first round. But then you have an Ezraku and a Scorton. I mean, do they slip in? I think it's going to be a lot of edge rushers, and so I'm at 6, which is already, like you mentioned, more than the 5. But it
Hmm.
wouldn't surprise me if it goes to 7 or 8. This again is where I went back to comparing position groups, and when I
Yep.
started looking over at the running backs, I was like, man, I like those guys. When I look at the offensive linemen, I like those guys. I feel real good about that. We haven't got the defensive tackle, but I like that. So when I looked at that and then went back over to the edgers, even though there's a lot of guys to like, there's also a lot of guys with questions. So that's why I came in at 6, and I figure you got the over here, but that's why I did come in at 6.
You bringing back up the idea of the overall depth of the position group, what can you get? Almost made me want to lean back the other way because I do like the edge rushers that a team can get. Maybe not overall on day two, but the second round in particular. I think you can get, especially if enough teams think that, because then two of these guys slip, right? Let's say
Right.
Azaraku, Tuamalau, and let's say even Pierce all slip to the second round. We only get our five. That's three more teams. I can get one of those guys in the second round, plus a Sawyer or a Swinson or a Gillette, one of those guys. But I am going to go over. I'm going to go with the over because these guys, again, these are the late risers in these mocks. Like Michael Williams is not getting past 9 with New Orleans. Jalen Walker's probably not getting past 8 with Carolina, which is funny because that's where you and I have been this whole time. Like Jalen Walker 8, Jalen Walker. We just came off of that like 3 weeks ago. And it's like, nah, he's not getting past him. It's
Well,
just
and I did it again last night with Robertson. So
so
yeah,
you set it
yeah.
all off. That's what it was. Um, and then when you're picking 10 through 32 again, well, not that many teams are going to pass on the traits of a Shamar Stewart. Like it's just not gonna happen. And then all the reports are the Falcons and the Bengals are both in on Mike Green and James Pierce Jr. Like they're not scared away by all the other stuff. So then it's just about like where do they fall on the board. And then you think about a team like the Ravens. Don't let non-football stuff get in the way of taking a really good value on a player. And by the way, they need an edge rusher. Um, the Eagles, same thing. They'll take a guy who maybe isn't a three down player, maybe isn't, you're worried about the maturity in the locker room because they got the guys to handle that. So there's just enough scenarios here, and I think this is our first time we're differentiating. There's enough scenarios here that you look at these guys and it's like James Pierce was considered a top 10 player in September. You know, Mike Green has fluctuated between being a top 12, being picked in the top half of the first round. I think Mike Green, I have even less trepidation on if he's going. Um, Not sure about JT Tuimalau. I love him. You love him. That's probably not going to happen. Eziraku, though, is one of those that I think a lot of people like him, but he always just kind of gets thrown into the last five picks. It's like the Lions or the Chiefs, like one of those teams. And it feels right whenever it happens and whenever I see it, whenever I do it. But then when I think about it later, I'm just like, our team's gonna love Eziraku the way we do. Like, is he really gonna be a first round draft pick? Um, but we all like him enough, and I think even like the Dane Jeremiah's and Tom McShay's like him enough. I think he's in both their mocks for the first round. So, yeah, I'm gonna go over here on this one.
Yeah, and listen, there's a lot to love about all of these edge rushers. Boy, there's a lot. But there's also questions about just about everybody past Abdul Carter. In some cases, you're looking at traits, not production. In other cases, you're looking at tons of production, but then, the small schools, the all field stuff. If you need an edge rusher, though, they're in this draft. You shouldn't, you may not get the guy you want, but you shouldn't have any trouble getting a guy.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to defensive tackle. This goes nicely with this. So I set this at 3.5. The names that we all know are Mason Graham, Walter Nolan, Kenneth Grant, Derek Harmon. I probably should have set this at 4.5, but then you get to like Darius Alexander and Tyler Williams. Um, the late fall on these mocks for Mason Graham is pretty wild. Maybe that's because of this whole Jacksonville thing. Like it was just so easy to mock him to Jacksonville for so long that now that there's questions, It's Bo. Here we go. Here's the reference. It's Bo Callahan, right? We thought he was going number one overall of the Cleveland Browns, and then they didn't, and everyone panics and just goes with their board, assume because they didn't think he would be there, and they do it something else, and he falls down the board. Maybe that's what's happening with Mason Graham right now. Everyone's freaking out. We all thought he was going to go five. Now we don't know what's going to happen. When in all reality, he's not going past like the Jets or the Panthers at 7 or 8, but everyone's freaking out. Walter Nolan, huge range on him. Todd McShay put him in his top 10. He put him at 8 to Carolina above Mason Graham. Meanwhile, Daniel Jeremiah has him out of the first round in his latest mock. So pandemonium happening. Late fall for Kenneth Grant, who we both have in our top 10 boards, because everyone's like, hey, he's just a nose tackle. You know, there's no pass rush, which is wild, but whatever. Everyone loves Derek Carmen. Everyone likes Alexander enough, but so 3.5, Ben. Here's what I'm setting it at for you. 3.5. Where are you going?
I'm going to take the over. And oddly enough, in spite of all the chaos you just mentioned that's going on, this has been the position group I think I've been the most solid on for the longest period of time. I settled in on these four defensive tackles probably, 6 weeks ago at least, if not 8 weeks ago. And I just haven't really looked back. I haven't hesitated. Matter of fact, I've kind of gotten stronger on it because the more I've looked at Derek Carmen and what he can do and where he does fit, boy, I don't see these four guys: Mason Graham, Derek Carmen, Walter Nolan, Kenneth Grant. I just don't see them getting out of the first round, and I don't even think it's particularly close. I figure by the top 25 picks, they're all gone. I really feel like, boy, you got to, even if they get to that stretch of 2021, 22, where the Steelers, Chargers, and
Right.
all reside,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to make it past there. So I really love these four guys. Mason Graham may not go to Jacksonville. I'm totally willing to accept that. They can go a lot of directions. But even if he doesn't, the Raiders might eat him up. And if he doesn't go there, the Jets would be thrilled to have him. You mentioned that. That was something you mentioned yourself, 7 weeks ago, right? On
That was
some of
where I
our early,
started.
early.
Mason Graham 7. Yeah.
That's where we started. So Mason Graham to me is not going to get outside the top 7 or 8, even if he doesn't go to Jacksonville. But this is my most solid group. So I got the over. I got four. And again, it would not surprise me if somebody looked at Darius Alexander and said, hey, pick 30, 31, 32. We'll take him. I'm not predicting that. Don't expect that. But again, I can see it.
TJ Sanders is another guy, South Carolina, that, but probably not like that. He should be in the 50s kind of deal. This is the position that along with running back, it's so deep all the way through, but there's a big chasm for me on these, especially these four guys. But then you get past Darius Alexander as kind of like a half into first round guy. That I don't love the other guys as much as I thought I was going to going into the process. When everyone says this is such a deep class, there's a lot of good role players. I think there's a lot of good like finishing pieces, but I'm not looking at my choice of Walter Nolan or whoever, Mike Green, and thinking I can get a facsimile of Walter Nolan in the third round, right? I'm not going, I want Walter Nolan, but I'll take Omar Norman Lott, who I like. I like Omar Norman Lott, but I like him as a third guy, rotational pass rushing defensive tackle. Walter Nolan, I want on the field like every snap, no matter like the situation, down, distance, anything. Um, that's not how I feel about running backs. That's not how I feel about some of the corners in this class. Um, I want these guys at the top if I want a defensive tackle. So I'm gonna make sure I get them. And you mentioned that little run there. I mean, even starting with Cincinnati at 17, they're gonna need a defensive tackle. Tampa at 19, they could always take one. Denver, Pittsburgh, Chargers, Packers. Everything we're hearing is saying the Vikings could even take another defensive tackle.
Yeah.
That's Houston. That's 6 picks in a row. And then you get to Baltimore at 27 again. They'll just take great value. The Chiefs at 31, the Eagles at 32. All four of those guys are gone. I'm not worried about the slides for anybody. San Francisco up at 11 is a sneaky, like they're leaning. It sounds like they're leaning more defensive line than offensive line. So I think these guys go, and I think they go pretty quick.
I agree. I'm convinced that Mason Graham is a top 8, if not top 5 pick. When it gets to Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan, I think they're top 20 locks, in my opinion. I thought that weeks ago, and then I heard a lot of people saying some different stuff, and so I went back and questioned myself, and I just haven't been able to move myself off of it. I think they're gone anywhere from 11 to 18. I think there's too many teams there that are just going to love them. Everybody from the Bengals, even to the Cowboys, and you mentioned the 49ers. And then you get down to that little run that I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh, Chargers, Packers. I think any one of those three would love to have Harmon. And if he's there and another player they love isn't, they're going to snap him up. I think that's it.
Yeah.
23 is the latest there, in my opinion.
Yeah. Um, I do think, and the Steelers stuff is in the background. I like Kenneth Grant more than just almost anybody in this draft, but I do think Harmon, like his absolute floor is 21. So then you're talking about all those other teams.
Yeah.
I don't Kenneth Grant getting past Harbaugh at 22. Don't think so.
No.
And then Graham is top 10. I think Nolan is maybe the second guy off the board. So I think 22 is
Right. Maybe.
almost the floor of all four of those guys going for sure. All right, linebacker. This one will be quick. Zero point 0.5. I always have a zero point 0.5 in here somewhere. Jahad Campbell. There's some Carson Schwessinger love. That's not going to happen. Just wanted to say his name one time on the podcast this whole way through. Jahad Campbell. Does he go in the first round?
I'm going to say yes. So I've got the over here, and I've warmed up to him. I'm still not as in love with him as some people are, and that's
Shout out
totally
Austin.
fine. Yes, shout out to Austin. I love that people see this stuff differently and that they stick to it. I like that. I don't enjoy groupthink at all. But still, I have warmed up on Campbell, especially with fits to certain teams. And I'm not one of those people who say all it takes is one team in the first round. That's how often is that? 31 teams don't like a guy and one team does.
Right.
That never happens. More than likely, let's say worst case, 2/3 of the league don't want him in the first round, but another third of the league does, and all it takes is one of those teams that has him as their top-rated guy at that spot, and he's gone. So, boy, I could see Campbell going, honestly, based on what we think will happen, anywhere from, say, 15, 16 range all the way back to, 25. I figure he's gone by that time, honestly.
I definitely agree with that range. You know who I feel like should be a sneaky him team, and I haven't seen this? Miami at 13. I don't think I'd
Yeah,
hate that. I don't
no,
think
I
I'd
wouldn't
hate
hate that
that.
either.
Yeah, I think Campbell goes over. There you go, Austin. We did your Campbell. Great, great, great on you. Corner. This one's fun. Oh, the other thing with linebacker, real quick, is there does seem to be a lot of like nice players that people kind of like day two. Um, Stutson, Knight, um, Carter still getting a little bit of love, it seems like. So Schweissinger, obviously. So it seems like there is still some guys that people love, but I think Campbell, in terms of his uniqueness of what he does, that size, speed, tackling, all that,
Yeah.
I think he feels pretty safe. Nobody that is like, oh, this guy would be a home run third round pick that might make a team pass up on Campbell. All right, corner. History leans 4. So I set this at 3.5.
Yeah.
You got Will Johnson out of Michigan, who we love, but he's falling off boards. He is out of the first on Daniel Jeremiah's mock. Out of the first round entirely. Yeah, that's burning you up. I knew that would get you. Jade Barron. Jade Barron is here. Maxwell Harrison, who I love, Kentucky. Trey Amos getting some late buzz love. Could see him as a good fit with a couple teams. Savon Ravel, I love. Benjamin Morrison. Feels like I haven't seen this report anywhere, but he's just still like at the top of all these conversations and coming back to the top of these conversations. That I think that means teams are getting positive intel on the injury stuff for him. Total round one talent player, but 2 hip injuries going back to high school. Like that just makes me really, really nervous. Um, the other thing, these guys are almost all entirely different flavors. You look at these guys and they almost all excel in completely different things. So they all probably have like one first round trait or two or three, but not all the first round traits that you would look for, and not anybody that has any like super high major weaknesses. So it's just going to be about what team has the right scenario pop up where they say, that's a corner we need, that does the thing we need, that's there, and all the other guys we like aren't there. But I went with 3.5 when we're really considering these 6 guys in total. Where'd you go here?
I went with the under, and quick note, obviously, because we put Travis Hunter over in the wide
Right.
receiver group.
Yep.
He's not
Yep.
in this cornerback group for our purposes tonight. So I went with 3. The cornerback group, I was all over the map. I have honestly been trying for weeks and weeks to see how many cornerbacks I could reasonably fit into the back part of that first
Hmm.
round. And what I kept coming back to every time was, even though I like this group of cornerbacks, and you were dead on just a second ago when you said they're missing some of the first round markers. Um, That's what I kept coming back to is boy, although I like them, I've got to really need one in order to take them in the back part of this first round. And I just didn't see enough of that strong need to get a lock in. So I came in at three, and even if you take Hunter out, I'm probably down to two. I think it's Will Johnson, Jahdae Barron, and maybe one of the guys slips in. That's where I'm
Right.
at. So it reminded me very much of the wide receiver group, except I've got the wide receiver group rated higher as a group than I do, the cornerbacks. It feels like there's a few more questions about the CBs than there are the wide receivers, especially when you mentioned all the different flavors. Because boy, there's so many different flavors of wide receivers sitting over there, and there's so many different flavors of cornerbacks sitting over here. So that's where I came in at. I came in at three, and then maybe even just two, but I couldn't get myself past three because man, it's like boy, do I take a CB or an edge? Well, I like the edges a little better. Do I take a CB or the wide receivers? Well, I like the wide receivers a little bit better. I love the defensive tackles. I like the O lineman better. So that's kind of where it kept coming back to for me.
I think I'm gonna go over here. This is when I was talking back and forth too. I want to go back to the corner versus wide receiver thing because I think that's interesting when you look at the grand scheme of those positions, right? We hit tackle, we hit edge, we hit O line when we talked about those, but I want to come back to receiver and corner. Um, yeah, when you start doing mocks and you're like, and you purposefully want to push up defensive line pass rush, corner starts to fall a little bit because before we were mocking these corners at San Francisco 11, Miami 13, Atlanta sneaky 15. Probably not, but you could do one there if you wanted to. But now it's like, okay, Arizona, if those pass rushers go like corner, like they would, Will Johnson, they would eat that up, right? Uh, but then you got Tampa at 19, Cincy at 17 maybe, but they feel edge rusher, pretty solid, pretty solid. Chargers at 22 have done some nice things. Green Bay is the big one, Minnesota is the big one, so that's four. The Rams should. All indications are they're just not going to do it. It's just not going to happen. So take that off. Baltimore could. That's five. And that kind of feels like the last one. Like maybe Philly's a sneaky one at six, but probably not. So I'm really looking at these five teams. I'm still thinking all those teams. I could still look offensive line. I could still look another pass rusher. I could still look receiver. Some of those teams are also good trade back candidates, right? The Falcons only have four picks. The Falcons only have five picks. The Vikings only have four picks. So it just feels like, and I'm taking Benjamin Morrison out. I know he's still getting some love, but that kind of medical history at corner. Remember when didn't Tennessee take Caleb Farley in the first round that year out of Virginia Tech,
Too far back for an old
and
man.
he
Sorry.
had back stuff, and it just never happened. Um, I think corner is too tricky of a position to add the medical red flag to. So now I'm thinking about these five teams, and yeah, it feels like Johnson's good, Barron's good, but it feels like Harrison, Amos, and Revel are kind of fighting for one spot. When you intentionally, as we're doing, push up the edge rushers, push up defensive tackles, push up the trenches. Um, but I don't know, man. Could two of those guys get in? That's tough. I'm going back and forth now. I'm gonna go over. I am gonna take four. I think two of those last three get in.
You and I have done so many mocks, and a lot of that with our Box Score Network brothers in
Hmm.
a number of different shows, not just the one bigger one, but a number. I think by the end of the day, you and I have probably mock drafted for almost every single team, and in some cases, multiple times, like in a live scenario where we played out stuff. What I kept coming back to was because you mentioned all the teams that could use a defensive back. And in every case, when I was drafting for those teams, it was in my head, Will Johnson is already gone. I hope Jahdae Barron falls. If Jahdae doesn't fall, I'm picking a different position in almost every case. And it wasn't that I don't like Hairston or that I don't love Revel, because I love Revel. You know I do. And I know you love Hairston. But boy, every time it came to those spots, it was like, man, I got this other guy over here who looks like he's more talented. So even though I might have bigger need, I'm going to go big board here. That was where it came back to.
Let's do the corner and wide receiver thing real quick, big picture. As we are now here at the end of the draft process, and let's say you're a team choosing between corner and receiver, whether it's between the two of them and you need to stack the two positions, or you're just looking at one of them in your first two picks. Which one would you feel more comfortable waiting until your second round to take? Or even potentially waiting until just wait until day two. You got to find a guy in the second or third round. Where do you feel more comfortable?
What a perfectly devious question, Simon, because it's going to completely reverse everything I just said.
Yes.
Because,
Got him.
yes, way to go. Beautiful. Well done. Very well played. Okay.
Bonus points.
In my head, based on everything I've seen, while that I like to say the top six wide receivers better than I like the top six CBs,
Mm,
once you get to wide receiver 8, 10, I'm still kind of happy in the late second round,
yep.
early third round. I'm like, okay, I can do something with this.
Hmm.
You get to pick 50 and 55 where CB 6 and 7 are. I'm like, dang it, man. No, I don't want that. That's what I might usually find in the middle of the third round in a lot of drafts. It
Right.
dries up quick at
Yep.
CB.
Yep.
So if you want one, need one, it's okay to reach in the late first round. That's totally fine. Pick 20, 24, 28, whatever. Go for it. But if you don't do that, you better get them before pick 50 because I think they're all gone. Any of the ones truly worth having, making a big difference outside of the lottery ticket type of scenario, right? I think they're all gone. So under that scenario, boy, if you need a CB, you better get one early second round.
Yeah. Yeah. I have found a couple guys on day three that I like a little more than I thought at corner. Um, Quincy Riley being one. I like Noah Williams out of Cal, but like I also don't want to draft him and trust him. Like I just like him. He's just fun. He's like poor man's Maxwell Harrison, where he's like fighting people and getting up in people's face and everything. Um, but Quincy Riley's only has been that one. People like Jacob Parrish still right out of Kent State, like, but he like probably projects to it. So there's like you can talk yourself. But the more I watch these receivers, man, I see people that are still like outside of people's top 100. I'm like, I like that guy. I would take that guy. And
Right.
and when you think about, what the difference between those guys would be, first round to second round guys to third round guys, that chasm is closer at receiver to me. Even though I really like those guys at the top, that's still closer to me than yeah, where you're looking at if you pass on a round one corner and you're like, oh, I'll try to get one late in the second round. Because now, I mean, like Darian Porter's on these mocks in like the second round, and that I like Darian Porter. That's gonna take work. That's a year or two of getting this guy ready. Um, and I just might not have that if I'm one of these teams. So, yeah, I'm with you.
And I'll pile on to that. This is something that you could say about any year, but wide receiver, it's easier to like a guy because you throw him in there and he produces something, and you're like, okay, he helped. But at defensive back, you're really counting on him, even if it's zone defense. You are counting on him to hold down something, or you're kind of screwed. Other positions have to go over and help, or you're giving up a touchdown. And it's a lot harder to look at and like and trust these defensive backs once you get out of the top 50 or 60 picks than it is to say, oh, yeah, there's a wide receiver who's a tool in the box. I can use him on certain kinds of situations. It's just more difficult to do that with these defensive backs.
Yeah, there's a wider margin of error for a rookie receiver than a rookie
Yeah,
corner for sure.
there is, unfortunately.
All right, last one here. Safety. I said at 1.5. We have Malachi Starks. We have Nick Eamon. Do one, none, or both get into the first round, Ben?
I came in with both. And here was my thinking. Malachi Starks, I love. I'm just not buying, and I've seen it, for 2 months now, the idea that Malachi Starks is going to slide past 20 or out of the first round. I'm not buying that. I figure somewhere in the top 20, he's gone. And even if not that, boy, I think some of those teams sitting in the 20s would salivate if he slid to them. I just cannot see him in any scenario sliding out of the first and really out of the top 20. But again, I get it. People see things differently, but not the first round. He's
Hmm.
in. Eamon Warrior is the one that for me was a big question mark. It did come back down to Eamon Warrior is not a great first round selection when you turn on the tape and you realize there are certain things he cannot do
Hmm.
and he fits only kind of certain defenses. But the tape is still good. It's
Hmm.
good enough to be considered in that first round. And then you look at the athleticism, the RAS scores, the combine numbers, and you're like, oh my gosh, if the right DC gets him, you could really power up. The
Yep.
DC could power him up and he could power up the defense. So it really felt like in a lot of cases, he's just too good to pass up, even though he can't do everything you might normally expect a safety to do. That's what I came back to. Because again, it was like, boy, Eamon or Hairston, Eamon or Rebel,
Hmm. Hmm.
Eamon
Yes.
or this edge rusher who's small but fast. That's really what it came down to. And more often than not, I found myself voting for Eamon.
That was the exact math I was doing. So Starks in, yes, lock, absolutely. Even Warrior, that was the same math. I was putting him up against those corners. Like, okay, if I'm especially in the back part of that first round, if I'm a playoff team, what am I gonna need? Do I need a guy that can cover, or do I need a versatile, interesting chess piece? Because even Warrior, he's super athletic. Right now, his coverage skills are raw, even on tight ends. So you're getting him as a like blitzer, run defender, deep safety. He could do the deep safety stuff for sure. Raw athlete. Minnesota at 24 is so fun that we've talked about that all
Right.
process. Kansas City 31, sneaky, really fun, right? Put him in a Spags defense, like that would be kind of sick. Philly 32 has been talked about. They trade Chauncey Gardner Johnson away, but like first round safety like just doesn't feel right for Philly. I ultimately went with under, which makes sense because I took the over on the corners, right? I think Harrison gets a spot, Amos could get a spot, Revel could get a spot. And then yeah, if you're like, oh well, Eamon Mori in the box is run defense. Well, I've got Jahad Campbell, I've got Ezra Raku, I've got the defense tackles. So ultimately, I ended up pushing him out. So I went under, and I did just do the math and made sure that I wasn't being hypocritical. And I think I came up with 32 names, which now means I can go to the Box Score Network MockOut Mock Draft Contest, which I hope everyone is checking in on, and I can plug those 32 names in. Um, that link will be in this episode description on YouTube and on the audio version of the podcast. So do a mock, submit it. It's really fun. You get to hear a really bad video tutorial of me doing one on my phone in the middle of some of these ads somewhere. I think a couple videos back, me and Austin doing our top 50. So check that out. Check out all this stuff. Ben, anything else you want to plug about the draft or any final thoughts? We did it, man. This was about an hour.
I just major props to everybody on the network, real quick. We have done it for 2 months now, tons and tons and tons of draft work from different angles, and we've studied. We haven't studied everybody, but boy, have we put in the work. We're not just feeding off of what somebody else said. We have put in a ton of work. Really proud of the network, and the content is great. Please go check it out.
If you're on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. Please like this video. Please subscribe. Please comment. Give us your 32 guys. Give us your over under on all these positions. We would love to hear. I'll put a comment on the video with the over unders that I gave Ben so you can reference back, comment back with what you think for each position. If you're listening to the audio podcast, and if you've listened to this thing 4 times, man, God bless you. Thank you. Hopefully we kept this thing shorter than the other three, and you guys got to enjoy the whole thing. So again, to everybody watching, everybody listening, happy draft day, happy draft weekend. Don't go away. We'll be here all weekend long for you. Um, Thank you all so much. Have fun and be safe out there.